So we have been talking about the spiritual disciplines, the activities in the Christian life that Jesus both talks about, makes reference to, and also through the history of the church, people have found to be beneficial as far as growing in the life of faith goes. And so in the big picture, what we're doing here is we have this image of a small baby. This is a baby in swaddling clothes, which I was told this week is now medically inappropriate to do. They found swaddling clothes are not good, so they have to put babies in something else. So, I don't know. And then up here is the mature Christian, where Paul talks about that his goal and ambition was to present each person complete, each person mature, fully grown up in Jesus Christ. And so obviously there is a process in the life of faith from the time of our conversion, when we become alive spiritually. We're born dead in our trespasses and sins. But there's a point in time in which we become alive spiritually, and we are spiritual infants. And then over the years, we are to grow up in Christ. So by the end of our lives, we are mature. We're fully grown. And so we understand that this is a process that goes on. And so, you can think about it. So you have an infant. How long does infancy last? What, 6 months?
16 years.
Depends on the
Hang on to that thought, and I'm going to come back to that thought. Okay, so you have a baby that's, let's say, 5, 6 months old. How old's Zeke now? I don't even know.
He'll be 5 at the end of the month.
He'll be 5. Okay, so we have a 5-month-old grandson. So I can hold him, and he's very small. It's always my impression when I'm holding a boy. And so, what do you do with a 6-month-old? Well, you take care of it, right? You feed it, you clothe it, you bathe it, you pay attention to it. He's just starting to get to that age where he's starting to recognize different people. At 2 or 3 weeks, when I would hold him, the only thing he knew is whatever this was that was holding him, it wasn't his mom. And he wanted his mom, so he'd cry, and give him to mom, and that's fine. Or grandma worked too, But he's just now to the stage where he is, you can make faces at him, and then he just studies me, and I'm holding him and making faces, and I'm saying crazy things to him, and he's just like, okay, I have no idea what this is. Okay, so that's an infant. So what comes after infancy? Toddler? Okay, so you think he's going to grow up. He'll start walking and moving around. Okay, so now when he's a toddler, of course, you start to expect a little different reaction and behavior from him, right? So now I shouldn't have to take quite so much care. He doesn't need quite so much attention. He starts to develop some autonomy. Okay, and you start to teach him, don't put your finger in the light socket, and, put the sharp knife down, all that, you to play with that. Okay, so then after toddler comes...
Young child.
Child?
Young child.
Young child. Okay, so he's starting to speak, hopefully by this time he's developing language, and then, words that are appropriate, how to use them. Words that grandpa uses that's okay for grandpa, kind of maybe, but not okay for him to use. All of that kind of stuff that goes on. Okay, and then after young child, you get a...
Preteen.
Preteen, okay, fair enough. Preteen, and so now you're teaching them, again, responsibility. You're teaching them things that are okay to do, how to have fun, various things that go on. And then you get to your teenage years, and by that time, of course, they better know how to work. And so I'm teaching them how to work, do all these things, and then you get to adulthood, because the idea is you want to take this infant and get him to a mature adult, a fully grown adult man, eventually, in the case of Zeke. All right. So it's really cute when they're 6 months old, and and you got to take care of them, and all of that sort of thing. But what happens when you get somebody who's chronologically 15 and mentally and socially and intellectually 6 months. It's not cute anymore, is it? Right? And you know, at 4, where he is demanding his autonomy, okay, he's got to learn there isn't autonomy. What happens when you get a 25-year-old who's mentally, emotionally, psychologically 6 months old? That's not cute anymore, is it? And you don't want to be around that person anymore, you know. So the idea is that in the growing and the maturity, there's things that are appropriate to each stage of life, and that you can reasonably expect. And so, yeah, Danny, it's a pretty disgusting thing when you got a 16-year-old in your house that's acting like a 2-year-old. Because what does a 2-year-old want? Everything. The world revolves around them. Well, okay, you're 2. You got to learn that the world doesn't revolve around you. But when you start getting a teenager, or a 20-year-old, or a 30-year-old thinks the world revolves around them, then there's a problem. There's a major problem. We understand that. Spiritually, the same thing, though, takes place. What is your reaction when you meet somebody that's been a Christian, has a profession of faith, and they've been a Christian for 20 years, but they're still 6 months old? This is where Paul said, look, I got to go over this stuff with you again. You should be eating steak. And I got to give you baby food because you can't handle it. And he reprimands them for that. So there is a maturity process that we have to be engaged in, and we ought to be engaged in. Now, here becomes the question, what does it take to get from here up to here?
Food, lots of food.
Lots of chow. I would agree. Yes. I watch my 10-year-old grandson eat, and I'm like, you're a shrimp. Where are you putting all that food? This kid can eat. Okay, so the question is, what does this take? Because it does not just automatically happen. You can't just kind of float along in life and take, if you're going to get here, you can't just float along. So it takes some involvement, it takes some disciplines, it takes training for this to happen the way that it's supposed to happen. Now, there's an interesting studies that are done constantly, and for people that like to read national and international statistics, it has been, if they do this survey, they do it and they use different words, but it's been done by, it's done every year. Well, they'll do these surveys in different countries, as many countries as they can, to identify where the happiest people live. Okay, who is the happiest?
Finland.
And it's always, it's either Finland or Denmark. They kind of switch back and forth. But it's almost always Finland that has the highest happiness index. It's the Scandinavian countries that by and large, hit it. So you get Finland, you get Sweden, you get Denmark, you get Norway. The Norwegians are always at the bottom of the top of the Scandinavian list. Okay, so they always rate highest in happiness. So who are the most unhappy people in the world?
Americans.
No, we're actually it's the Scandinavians, it's the Northern Europeans, it's United States, it's Canada, it's Japan. Those are all the top. That's the top here. So where do the unhappiest people in the world live?
Russian, third world.
Russians.
Russians are kind of in the middle. Russia always winds up kind of in the middle of the heap. It's places like Afghanistan, North Korea, Sierra Leone, Chad. A lot of the Western African countries are always at the lowest. And what they have found is that there seems to be a correlation between happiness, people, and this is self-reporting, so it's not like they define happiness. They just ask the people, are you happy? You know, generally speaking, you're happy, and they go with self-reporting. Is that there's a correlation between happiness and gross domestic product. In other words, as income goes up, generally self-reported happiness goes up. All right? So, you know, the question is, could you take a person out of Finland and put him in Chad, and would he be just as happy? And could you take somebody out of Chad and put them in Finland, and would they be just as miserable? And so there's debates about that. But generally speaking, there is a correlation between income and standard of living, and they look at more than just GDP, although GDP is a big one. Then they also throw in things like longevity, what's the life expectancy in these countries, and social safety nets and all this kind of stuff. So, but generally speaking, there's a correlation between countries with high GDP and self-reported happiness. But this is the interesting thing. When instead of saying, are you happy, saying, are you satisfied? And does your life have purpose? That does not correlate with GDP. In other words, what happens is even the countries that report high happiness, they don't necessarily report high satisfaction or report a sense of purpose in their lives. That, there's no correlation between. Which is odd, because who do you suppose ranks high at the satisfied, I'm satisfied and I have a life of purpose? It's not the Scandinavian countries. It's not the high GDP countries. It's actually third world countries that have a tendency to report higher satisfaction and a life of purpose. Now, given the options, which would you rather have? A life of happiness or a life of satisfaction and purpose?
Well, third world.
It's not a trick question.
Yes.
Oh, you're expecting an answer, okay.
Yeah.
Count Leo Tolstoy, you've referenced him.
Yeah.
That's kind of a
Shows-
loaded question.
He shows poverty at the end of it.
Hang on, Danny. I'm going to come right back to you, because that was a good point. Go ahead.
Count Leo Tolstoy, who you referenced, it shows poverty because he found no fulfillment in his riches.
Yeah, that was a good example, because he's going, what makes people happy? And he looked at the nobility, and he looked at all these wealthy people, and he was at this up, and he goes, these people are miserable. And then he goes down to the serfs, in essence, slaves he's got working on their land, the poverty, they're never going to get out of it. And yet he found those people to be living satisfied, purposeful lives. Yeah, he experienced it. And so he rejected, gave away all his wealth, and became, in essence, a serf. Okay, Denny, you said it was a loaded question.
Yeah.
You're accusing me of asking a loaded question?
It comes down to that. yeah.
Such audacity. Okay, okay, go ahead.
First of all, happiness is like the stock market. It's based on expectation and anticipation. So it's shot full of holes, because so many people think if I can only have this or do this, I'll be happy. So happiness is not necessarily a feeling, it's an expectation. And on the other side of the fence, third world countries, they don't even know what a high level is. Their expectations of what will satisfy them might be to be able to plant their seed in the ground today, or straight water in the hole that they dug, and their purpose then is more easily satisfied because their expectation level is at a much lower level.
Ooh, I was with you right up to the end. So you're saying that as long as we drop our expectations far enough, we don't expect too much,
Right, then you can easily.
then we can be more readily happy?
No, you're gonna be able to achieve what you get to gain satisfaction that I reached the level.
Yeah, but so the key to the whole thing is the level of our expectation or the level of our desire?
To a certain degree, yeah.
So the key is don't want anything.
Well,
then you're a Buddhist.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's exactly Buddhism. But, and there is a strain of Christianity that says that. Just get rid of your desire. But the Bible never tells us to get rid of our desires. So, okay, Jim, what are you going to say?
Well, happiness is being happy with what you have. Kind of like what Danny was saying, but happiness is, being content with what you have.
Okay. So be content with what I have.
Yeah. I'm very content with what I have. I really have no real major wants in my life right now.
So are you saying then that ambition, aspiring to and having ambition to be more, to do more? I mean, I can see, be very content. I know drunks that live on the street have no place to go, and by and large, you can find people in there that are content with that. They don't want anything else. They don't want any. So, then they're happier?
They may be happier than what you are.
So therefore, we should all just go be homeless people because that's the key to happiness?
Be content and happy with what you have and what you desire. I have no major desires at this point in my life.
Okay.
I see stay healthy, enjoy my wife, and see my grandkids.
You have some and you're not here.
So is that then the key to the thing?
that'd be dangerous.
Exactly.
Yeah, that kind of heads towards decline.
Well, yeah, leaving aside the fact that the universe runs on entropy, where everything's winding down. The question is, if I'm just going to be content with what I have, isn't there a certain responsibility on my part to be more than I am right now?
It depends on what you're talking about. The Christian life, yes. But otherwise, at my age, I ain't got no big desires.
Well, that's kind of okay. So we talked about inward disciplines. So what are the 4 inward disciplines?
Study.
Study,
Meditation.
meditation, prayer,
Fasting.
and fasting. So those become the disciplines that I engage in, and they are individual and they are inward. Okay? So now we're getting to the outward disciplines. In other words, those that have external elements and manifestations to them. And the outward disciplines begin with simplicity. So how many of you live simple lives? 3 people say they live simple lives. What do you mean by that?
Some days get pretty complicated.
Some days, does it have to, yeah, the question is, with the discipline, the spiritual discipline of simplicity, is it just, in essence, doing nothing? Or is there a broader understanding of it?
It's
Now,
a standard of living that you've chosen to live.
it's a standard of living,
Where-
well,
It's a standard of living unless or getting rid of junk.
well, I would agree, that it involves stuff. We're gonna talk about stuff here. How many of you own a lot of stuff? Yeah. How many of you have a garage that you can't park your car in? Yeah. 2 of them. 2 of them. Even worse. How many of you are renting storage space somewhere? I don't care. Doesn't matter. And by the way, I'm not making anybody feel guilty here, because I have a lot of stuff. This week again, I went back and I said, start throwing it away. And
There's a garage sale coming up for missions. First weekend of August.
go through your stuff, right? And then we can all go buy each other's stuff and use the money to support missions. Yeah. All right. Yeah, and then next year, when there's another missions trip, we can all bring the same stuff, change it again, and by this method, we will fund missions in perpetuity. See, you don't have to make stuff up. Life just is ironic all on its own. All right, let me talk about what a life of simplicity isn't. First of all, you can't just measure this in terms of GDP or adjusted gross income. First off, simplicity is not poverty. It's not living in poverty. The Bible the Bible recognizes that poverty exists. The Bible never glorifies poverty. All right? It does not say that a really devout Christian lives on $10,000 a year or less. Because you can't say that, because $10,000 here is different than $10,000 in Sierra Leone or Chad or Afghanistan. All right? It isn't poverty. It isn't self-induced poverty. That is not the essence of simplicity, of the simple lifestyle. So it's very easy for Christians, and I've heard lots of sermons, and maybe once or twice in my life I've even preached against it, about all the stuff we have and all of the self-indulgent stuff, and you should get rid of all your junk. That's not what the life of simplicity is. It's not a glorification of poverty. It is not, I'm going to use this word in its literal sense, communism. In other words, it is not decrying the ownership of private property. A real devout Christian wouldn't own a house. A real devout Christian wouldn't own a car. A real devout Christian wouldn't own fill in the blank. It isn't the renunciation of private property. It isn't the renunciation of owning anything. So that's not what simplicity is. And it is not a refusal to save. I've met Christians that think having a savings account or having cash in your freezer or sock drawer or wherever you hoard your cash is wrong. I'm just going to trust God. I'm going to trust God to provide my needs. I'm just, so you don't save and anticipate. This is not what's
related just to money or stuff?
Either one.
Oh, okay.
Either one. Anything tangible. This is not what the life of simplicity is. So let's go back to the journey from spiritual infancy to spiritual maturity. And we all can understand it's not a linear journey, okay? It's up and down and sideways. So here's the question. What is it that gets us off track? What are some of the things that can get us off track on this upward journey?
Jesus.
No.
No, I don't think that answer works this time, Jim.
The devil.
I would say lust.
Okay? Lust
Yep.
can distract us. What else?
Materialism.
What do you mean by materialism, Michael?
Stuff.
Stuff.
The accumulation of stuff that you don't need.
Yeah. The accumulation of stuff you don't need. Oh, I like this.
A pack rat, yeah.
We don't need. Stuff we don't need.
Which might someday.
But you might need it someday. Absolutely.
That paid itself more than once.
How do we determine what we need?
Situation.
Inaccurately? How many of you need a car?
Oh, yeah.
Well, do you?
Yeah, my feet have
Something wrong with a bicycle?
my feet have been complaining a lot lately, yeah.
How many of you need a telephone?
In order to
Wait a minute, if I took your telephone away, you would die? You might.
eventually it's hard because you can't work, you can't get to work.
Why can't you get to work?
As I work 20 miles away from where I live.
Listen, I live on the Alger Grade.
And you work
So,
right.
no. I'm not talking about me.
Oh,
So there was a guy, John and I both knew him, we went to his funeral, Howard Staples.
This was a long time ago in a faraway country.
Howard lived on the Alger Grade. He would walk to town, work a 12-hour shift on the docks, and then walk home. So, did he need a car?
He needed sleep.
No, I'm sure he got rides and hitchhiked, and as soon as he could afford a car, he got a car. But hey, we're talking need. How do you determine whether you need something or not?
Does it pertain to your day-to-day existence?
Yeah, like we need food if we're gonna live and breathe.
See, this is whenever you talk about simplicity, people will immediately start talking about the difference between wants and needs. Fair enough. But when it comes down to it, how much do you need?
Probably very little.
Unless you have children.
Larry, have you ever had a period of your life where everything you needed fit into a backpack?
Yeah,
Yeah, so you did it, right?
yeah, for a year.
Yeah, amazing how that works. Mrs. Anderson,
Maybe it depends on how efficient you want to be.
how efficient I want to be?
You could work a lot more hours if you drove to work instead of walked. Or if
Well, they only let you work 12-hour shifts in those days, so.
that was there.
More time for a side hustle, you're not walking up and down the highway
He
too.
can work 20 hours a day.
So go back to my question. So you got the spiritual infant, you got the mature person up here. What is it that distracts us, that gets us off track on this growth from spiritual infancy to spiritual maturity? And you can't get around the fact that material stuff is one of the things that will distract us. Now, one of the observations that's also been made looking over the United States, but also the Northern European countries, basically since the end of World War II, is there's no doubt that the GDP has gone up. No doubt about that. I mean, we are living at a standard, everybody in this room is living at a standard of living, and I don't know who the poorest person here is, but every one of us is living at a standard of living that my grandparents could not have imagined. And my grandparents were not indolent. They were hard-working people, okay? They came here because this was better prospects. Well, on one side of the family, the other ones have been here for a while. They were hard-working people. But they could not imagine the standard of living that we have. It would have, go back to my grandfather working 15 cents an hour shoveling gravel into a dump truck for the township, thinking he was getting rich at 15 cents an hour, and explain the internet to him. Couldn't have done it. So the standard of living is there, but what simplicity is, it is identifying the things that will distract us on this journey from spiritual infancy to spiritual maturity and eliminating those things. It's identifying anything in our lives that are distracting us, that are pulling us away from this journey to spiritual maturity. And so simplicity becomes a different standard, something of a relative standard for each one of us. Now, you think about this goes back to what our whole concept of vision is. What is the vision that you have for your life? Between now and the day you shuffle off this mortal coil, what is it that you want to accomplish with your life as far as your character development and as far as your impact within the kingdom of God? What do you want your life to look like? 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 50 years from now for some of you. What do you want it to look like? And that goes back to our vision, to our understanding of what life, what we're here for and what we're trying to accomplish. Now what's happened in the last 70 years in the United States and in Northern Europe, the Northern European countries, is as GDP has gone up, in other words, as the standard of living has risen for people, a sense of purpose and meaning has gone down. In other words, as our standard has gone up, as more stuff has become available to us, as we've accumulated more stuff, as our lives have gotten significantly better by almost every metric, our purpose and our reason for living, speaking corporately, has dropped. And one of the most disturbing things is in the last 5 years, why has the suicide rate in the United States gone up? In other words, more people are committing suicide today per 100,000, they measure numbers per 100,000. Our suicide rates are higher today than they were 50 years ago. But our standard of living is higher than it was 50 years ago. And suicide is one of the indicators that said people do not have purpose. And they don't have meaning. Which means they have no vision for their lives. Now, if I go back to my grandparents' generation again and use them as an example, what was their vision for life? What was their aspiration?
The vision would be survive.
Survive the Depression to start with. And then get electricity. You know? This is why part of my family, well, in our dying day, were Southern Democrats. Hey, Roosevelt gave them electricity. Do you know how much better life was with electricity than without? You know?
Saved a lot of eyesight.
Oh man, just everything got better. You didn't have to carry water anymore, and it was just all sorts of stuff. So the vision for a lot of it, and then okay, my parents' generation, they went off, fought World War II, defeated fascism, came home. What was their vision for life? Well, to do better than their parents had done, not fall back into the Depression. So they developed this economic engine, which gets great stuff. Okay. The World War II generation developed an economic engine that has been unparalleled in the history of the world. It was incredible what they did. So then comes to my generation. What did my generation? John, what happened in our generation? We looked at what our parents did and said, no, I don't want that. You know, I'm not going to war. I'm not going to, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll became the hallmark then of that generation. Why? The vision started to go down.
They want to be off-gridders.
Well, that's the interesting thing. There is a whole generation now, or there's a whole group of people, not a generation, there's a whole group of people. And I keep meeting these folks because they keep coming and buying lumber from me. And I like them. I mean, I really do. They're interesting folks. But they have decided that what they want to do is live the lifestyle that my grandparents lived. So a lot of them are living off the grid. They're farming. They're working part-time jobs. They're doing, you know, they're heating with wood. They're carrying their water. They're doing all this stuff. They want a simplified lifestyle, and that's their vision, and they're doing it. Now, on the one hand, I kind of admire them because I admire ambition. And I look at them and I go, okay, I don't think you guys quite have the full picture as to how much blame work this is, but I do, because I lived like that, you know. Shelley's she had 2 requirements for a house when we were deciding where we're going to live. Indoor plumbing and running water. After that, everything was negotiable, but those two things, you know. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I buy that, because the outhouse at 20 below is a little old. But there's this whole community now that's coming back, finding old farms, and finding places that they're gonna live a simplified lifestyle. So they have a vision of simplicity. Now, they're not doing it out of a Christian ethic, and not very many of them that I've met, but there is that movement there. So it is, in Christianity, simplicity is the discipline of finding those things in my life which distract me from my primary goal and my primary vision for my life. And what is ultimately our vision? What should our vision be? What should our goal in life be?
Glorify God. Jesus.
Glorify God, Jesus.
Glorify God and enjoy Him forever.
If this is my vision for what I want to accomplish in my life, and what I have is this understanding, what Paul talks about, the fully grown up, the mature Christian, and this is what I am going after in my life, then what I have to do is at times say, what is it that distracts me from that? What is it that pulls my attention away from that? What is it that trips me up in this journey and distracts me? And the reality is that if we don't have an adequate vision of things, what will happen is the material aspects of life will take our attention. We will automatically aspire after material stuff. And this happens individually, but hey, this happens in churches. You can have a church that loses its vision for why the church is here. And then you know what inevitably somebody will do or say? Let's build a building. Now, I'm not against building projects. But they'll say, let's build a building. And everybody will rally around that because a building is tangible. You can see it. It takes a tremendous amount of work. It takes years to get a building up. And they build the building, and this is great. And then the building's done, and then what?
The vision's gone.
The vision's gone. They're back to where they were before they started the building project. And so it is the vision of understanding what the bigger picture is that we are here to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And then what does that look like? And then what are the things in my life? What are the things in my life individually? What are the things in our lives corporately that are distracting us from that? That are pulling it away? So there are reasons why we need to make sure that we are living lives of simplicity. You can't just measure it with your adjusted gross income. You can't just measure it by saying, I own this stuff and no much more. It's more fluid than that. Because you could live a poverty lifestyle, but still not be living a life of true simplicity. And you could live a life, you could have a lifestyle in which, yeah, you know, you got a boat, you got a cabin, and you got all this extra stuff. But your life is actually focused and simplified, believe it or not. So here it is. Why do we do this? And we all know this. We pay lip service to this. We all know it. None of us believe it. Earthly stuff is temporary.
Yep.
This life is temporary. We all know that. Very few of us live as if we believe it. Because when we talk about wants and needs, if I went to your house and said, I'm going to throw away everything except what you need in life, how much would I throw away?
Most of it.
Yeah, most of it. If you came to my house, same thing, same story, right? And you know, which is easier, to throw your own stuff away or throw other people's stuff away? This is where I think maybe we could help each other out. Listen, I'll go clean out your garage, you come and clean out my shed.
And we'll be throwing it into our truck.
You're right. Then we'll be bringing it to the garage sale to support the mission trip, and we'll all be taking it home. Secondly, earthly stuff is distracting. Earthly stuff is distracting. Jesus talks about this. The more stuff you own, the more you got to pay attention to. Right? That's just the way it is. You got more stuff to keep track of, more stuff to organize, more stuff to take care of, and it takes time to own stuff because you will pay attention to them. I met a guy one time, he made an investment in the stock market. He made some money, or had some money, and he put it in the stock market. So he had it in the stock market for a while, and he finally decided he had to sell it. And he had to just buy a long-term CD at the bank and just leave it. I said, well, why'd you have to do that? He goes, every morning, the first thing I did when I got up was check to see how my stock was doing. I paid attention to the stock market like I'd never paid attention to the stock market before. What's it doing now? Where's it going to go? He said, I realized, and it didn't take him real long, I don't know, it was 90 days or 6 months or something. He finally said, I got to quit this. Okay, so I got this money, fine. He put it in a CD, knew he was going to make 3% at the time or whatever it was. He didn't have to worry about it anymore. Earthly stuff is distracting, and it distracts us because we pay attention to them. Thirdly, one of the reasons we have to do this, and we have to be careful about this, we will use earthly standards and stuff to judge not only ourselves, but the people around us. Now here's a question for you. When you first meet someone, just introducing yourself, getting acquainted a little bit, what do you most want to know about that person? And by what standards do you evaluate and place them in some kind of a hierarchy? And don't say you don't do it. Because every one of us does it. When you first meet someone, by what standards do you make judgments about them?
Good job.
Where do they get their money?
What do you do?
Yeah, okay, so when you meet someone, within 3 or 4 questions, what do you ask them?
Where do you live? What do you do?
Where do you live, and what do you do? What difference does it make where they live?
Are they visiting?
Standard of living.
Because it's going to tell us right away something about the standard of living. So I have people come, they're from the cities. I always say, oh, cool, what neighborhood? It's different if you live in North Minneapolis than if you live in Woodbury. It's going to tell me something about them. Okay? Then you chat a little bit. So, next question, so what do you do? And if they say I'm retired, then what's my question?
What did you do?
What did you do? What are you retired from what? So it becomes a standard of living and it becomes a false standard. Let's look at every evangelical's favorite book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. Chapter 3, verse 17. Well, we'll start with verse 14. And to the angel of the church in Laodicea write, the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of creation of God, says this: I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I would that you were cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spit you out of my mouth. Although the word literally is vomit. In other words, God's saying to these people, you make me sick. So sick I want to puke. Why? Because you say, I am rich, and I have become wealthy, and I need nothing. And you do not know that you are wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. And I advise you to buy from me gold refined by the fire, that you may become truly rich, and white garments that you may clothe yourself, and the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and eye salve to anoint your eyes, that you may see. Now there was reasons because of what happened within the city of Laodicea, in modern day Turkey. It was an incredibly wealthy city. In fact, they had an earthquake that destroyed the city, and the Roman Empire, the capital in Rome, heard about this. The city's destroyed, and so they were going to send aid. down to Laodicea to help them rebuild the city. And so the emissary from Caesar got there and said, well, we're gonna give you money, we're gonna help you out, we're gonna rebuild this. And they said, we don't need your help. We got it, we got this covered, you don't need to send us any help. We can do this ourselves. And they did, they rebuilt the city themselves. Now imagine a disaster up here where, you know, the city or infrastructure got destroyed and FEMA shows up and says, okay, well, we got money, we'll help you rebuild. And Lake County says, well, we don't need your money, we can do it ourselves. Oh, of course you take the money. But these people were so wealthy, they could say to the Roman Empire, we don't need you. All right? So they look at it and they go, wait a minute, I'm rich. We're wealthy. We don't need anything. We got this covered. By what standard were they judging themselves? By their material standards. And then, of course, there's the talking here about the whole business of hot or cold. There was a public water system at Laodicea. There were hot springs in the mountains about 6 miles away from Laodicea, natural hot springs, volcanic action. So they built an aqueduct to bring hot water to the city. And so the hot water would come into the city. But the problem was they built this. By the time the water from the hot springs got into the city, down the aqueduct, it wasn't hot and it wasn't cold. It was neither. So, okay, so they had the aqueduct system. And then there was in the ancient world, a medical school there that dealt with eye diseases in the ancient world. And then there was a clothing industry that made really white clothes, which in the ancient world, getting something white is a bit of a challenge. And they're looking at themselves saying, hey, we're good. We don't need anything. We're fine. And Jesus says to them, you make me want to puke. You make me sick to your stomach. Look, you're miserable and wretched and poor and blind and naked. Ooh. Jesus could have said that a little nicer, couldn't he? Did he have to be quite so harsh when he was laying it out? So it becomes the standards that we use. So when we get to the life of simplicity, the question is, where's your heart? Matthew chapter 6. So go back to the Sermon on the Mount, which is what we're talking about here. Jesus lays this all out. And that was the first battle, so I won't get this done. But we'll get the point. He says, don't lay up for yourselves treasures upon earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. What you treasure most in this life is where your heart is going to be. So this is the question. What do you treasure in this life? What do you treasure most in this life? Because that's where your heart's going to be. So if what you treasure is the spiritual journey and the aspiration to spiritual maturity, that's where your heart's going to be. But if you say, well, that's a good idea and I'm not opposed to it, but there's some other stuff I want to get to. Well, where's your heart going to go? Jesus goes on later and says, look, you can't serve God. You can't serve two masters. You only get to serve one master. If you have two masters, you're going to hate one, you're going to love the other, you're going to cling to one, you're going to despise the other. So the question then becomes, what do you treasure? Where's your heart? And all of this ties back ultimately then to which of the 10 Commandments? When stuff gets to be important to us, and the accumulation of stuff, which of the commandments addresses that?
The last.
Covetousness. What Jesus is talking about in this section, and we're going to be looking at that again, happens to deal with the 10th commandment, which takes us back to simplicity. To live lives of simplicity, in other words, lives free of covetousness, free of the distractions that get us off track in the journey from spiritual infancy to spiritual maturity. Which is why Paul, I think it's in Colossians, where he equates covetousness with idolatry. And what's the definition of idolatry? It's a review question, folks. It's putting something in my life in the place that only God deserves. If I let anything else in this world or in my life take the place, the focus, the attention that only God deserves in my life, I am committing idolatry, which means then I'm violating the first commandment. By the way, you notice how the 10 commandments just keep coming up in Jesus' teaching? They're just there. They just keep coming up. But it has to do with covetousness. So the life of simplicity, and that was the, yeah, I got it. So the life of simplicity then is a life in which I eliminate those things, whatever they are, in my life that distract me and pull me back from my one goal in life on this spiritual journey, which is to become a fully grown, mature Christian. And that's the life of simplicity. All right, let's close in prayer. Father, we praise you for your word and for this day, the chance to be together. And Lord, I pray you'd grant to us wisdom, that we would look at our lives and see where the things are, the activities, or the stuff is, that pulls our attention away from you. And that we would truly simplify our lives, that we may pursue the upward goal of the high calling of Jesus Christ. We thank you for this day, and all that will be in it, for the worship service that's ahead, and just ask it would work to your honor and glory. So we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.